Hello and welcome to another interview episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths, with me, John Cripwell. Today's episode is all about number confidence, not just children's confidence, but adults too. Because if we want children to feel that maths is something useful, approachable and genuinely part of everyday life, then the messages they hear from parents, carers, teachers and the wider community really matters. We talk about why so many adults still feel uneasy about numbers, how those feelings can be passed on without us realising, and what schools can do to build a more positive culture around maths. We also explore the brilliant work happening through National Numeracy's Schools and Families programme and how National Numeracy Day gives schools a chance to bring the whole community into the conversation. National Numeracy Day 2026 takes place, if you're listening to this on the day this episode is released, tomorrow, Wednesday the 20th of May, with the theme Count on Your Community. But don't worry, if you're listening to it later, there's still plenty to take away from this episode. Before we get going, please do follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave us a review if you can, and share the episode with a colleague who might find it useful. You can also get in touch with the show at primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk or find me on LinkedIn and Substack. My guests today are Paul Milner and Julie Pompa from National Numeracy, and I'm delighted to have them on the show. Welcome both.
Hey, John. Good to be here.
So, Paul, if you wouldn't mind just starting with yourself, just a brief introduction, who you are, how you've come to be in the role that you're in at the moment, and then in a moment, Julie, the same for you, if that's okay.
I'm Paul Milner. I'm the Programmes Director at National Numeracy. In terms of I've taken quite a meandering journey to here. I did enjoy maths at school, which I think was because my dad really encouraged me and made me feel like I was good at it. And because I thought I was good at it, I enjoyed it. And then because I enjoyed it, I think I got better at it, So I had a good relationship with maths at school and ended up doing a maths degree at St Andrews. But I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, which is quite interesting, actually, in retrospect. What do you do with a maths degree? I had no idea at the time. I knew you could maybe be a maths teacher, but I didn't think I'd be a good teacher. And I didn't understand any other options at the time. It's quite interesting in retrospect. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought what I'd do instead is, while I'm figuring it out, I'll go and work in a record shop. And I worked in one of the big chains that were around back then. And then I ended up I worked in the shops and then area management and then marketing and then buying. It was like 20 years. I ended up staying there.
You can't rush these decisions, can you, Paul?
No. And then I was just about deciding what to actually do. And the whole business ended, all these chains closed. But along the way, I was struck actually by people's numeracy. First of all, in the shops, on the shop floor, because in those days you had to work out what change to give the customers and everything. So like from day one, straight away, I was noticing people around me and their relationship with numeracy. And then in marketing, you had to manage budgets and things. And then in buying, it was all about cash flow and margins. And then eventually, I was in some of the board meetings and all these spreadsheet budgets would go around the room. And I could see half the people in the room were like really on top of it and confident with it. And half were just like not saying anything because of the numeracy. And I just observed that all the time, all the way through. So eventually after that, I saw a job ad for National Numeracy and it said maths background, but experience of projects. And it just seemed like me. So I applied for it. That was 2013. So I've been there since then.
Oh, wow. So you've been involved with National Numeracy for quite a while now then?
Since almost when it founded, yeah.
Just very quickly, I'm always interested. I speak to a lot of people who enjoyed maths at primary school, then didn't enjoy it at secondary, or they enjoyed it at primary and secondary, and then they did A-levels, and suddenly it became a different creature altogether, and it became too abstract. And then people who enjoyed it all the way through A-levels and really understood it went on to do maths degrees, and the same thing happened there. Sort of my thinking is, at some point, you reach an abstraction point where maths almost becomes something completely different. Did you enjoy your maths degree, Paul? Did you feel like you were understanding what you were doing with it, or not?
I loved it at primary. I loved it at secondary. I loved it at A level. I loved being at university,
Yeah,
but
that's
a
probably
lot of it was
telling, that answer.
a lot of, yeah, you know what I'm saying? A lot of it was like about the history of maths and
Right.
stuff. And in retrospect, I wish I'd got more out of it at that level.
Okay. Yeah,
And as I
that's
said, I
interesting.
didn't really know what I was intending to do with it, which would probably have influenced, you know. So
Yes.
I've still enjoyed it, but I feel a bit guilty that I didn't engage. If I had my time again, I'd engage more strongly with it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
probably do
That
slightly
makes sense.
different maths. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm.
Julie, welcome. How are you okay just to introduce yourself briefly, and yeah, how you came to be working at National Numeracy?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi. Well, I'm a schools and families officer here at National Numeracy, and that's working within the schools and families team, training and recruiting schools onto our program. And I've worked for National Numeracy for about 6 months now, and so I've just recently left the classroom myself as a teacher. Last summer, I finished working in schools after for 14 years. So, very much still attached to and interested in schools and what's going on in the classroom and education. So, yeah, thinking about my relationship with maths, I think at school, I definitely found it okay. It wasn't my favourite subject, but I didn't necessarily feel I hated it. I got on with it and I could do most of the things that I was meant to do. But it wasn't really on my radar to kind of continue it as a subject after secondary school.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because maths is often seen as sort of a Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. You're either really
Yeah.
good at it or you despise it.
Yeah, I was
But
pretty much average, I
yeah,
think, at
yeah,
it.
okay,
I think I got a B at
yeah,
GCSE. I'm quite visual, but it's quite interesting actually. When I became a teacher, and I spent most of the 14 years teaching year 5 and 6, and it's interesting that even then, some subjects that areas of maths I had to teach, I would slightly, not panic, but have to make sure that I knew exactly what I was doing when I was teaching the more complex methods and aspects of maths in a year 6 curriculum. So I do remember that, going over things quite a lot just to make sure that I knew exactly how to kind of teach and communicate.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Long
and
division for me. I don't think I
yeah,
ever learnt long division very well at school, so
oh,
I
yeah,
definitely had to learn that before I could
yeah,
teach it.
fractions,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
fractions and when you're getting into more complicated things to do with fractions, I definitely, had to take a moment, even year after year, kind of make sure that I'm kind of reteaching myself so that I was teaching it properly. So, it's not been something that's come really naturally to me, but again, not something that's kind of instilled anxiety in
no,
me.
no.
Yeah.
And when you think back to your own lessons as a pupil at school, Julie, were they similar to the sorts of lessons that you taught as a teacher in recent years, or what did they look like? Can you remember? I mean,
Um,
it wasn't very long ago, Julie, so I'm sure they'll
Well,
come
yeah,
back to
not to dig far back in my memory, but yeah, I think the difference I see is it's much more practical now. I do remember kind of you know being taught out of textbooks or on the board, I suppose. Not so much. There's so many amazing and brilliant ways to teach maths practically now, and all the resources that are out there, I think, are amazing. And that's kind of a big difference. I think it was much
Yeah.
more abstract, I think.
Yeah, I think I would definitely have benefited at school from some of the representations that we tend to use now, and
Mm.
being able to make those connections and things. Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much for both of you for taking the time to come on and talk to us. Obviously, it is, as we're recording this, it's Monday, the 18th of May, and National Numeracy Day is almost upon us on Wednesday. So it seemed apt to have you guys on and come and talk to us about the work that you do. So, Paul, I think now would be a good time just to introduce National Numeracy, really. What is it? What is this organisation that you two work for? And what do you do?
Right, so we are a charity. We're an independent charity, so we're not part of government, which means we have an independent voice, which is great. Also means we have to go out and find our own funding, which is, with any charity, that's constant work. There was a government report in 2011 called the Skills for Life report. And within that, it showed that half of adults, this was in England actually, half of adults have primary school levels of functional numeracy, which was quite shocking and almost like, oh, that can't be right. Although it has been confirmed several times since with like the PIAC studies that have been done since, and actually our work since has confirmed this as well. It's around half of adults at entry levels or primary school levels. And the charity was formed partly as a response to that. In 2012, the charity was formed to try and change the situation in the UK. And initially it was about just improving everyone's numeracy. It's improved numeracy across the UK, but gradually over the years, it's become more targeted to where we can have the most benefits. So it's supporting those who will benefit most from improving their numeracy. So we've gradually got more towards supporting disadvantaged communities or reducing the gender gap that we've learned about over the years. Yeah,
it makes sense. And am I right in thinking it was initially sort of adults within those areas that you were working with?
Yes, very much so initially. And it was that stat, that half of adults stat, that we set out to try and change that situation. But along the way, because if we're genuinely going to change the situation in the UK, then yes, we should be supporting adults, but also we need to support future generations as well if you're actually going to change the whole thing. So along the way, we started to look at working with children as well. And there's some data that shows that by the end of primary school, a disadvantaged child is on average about 10 months behind their richer peers with maths. And there's also evidence that around half of that is due to the parents, actually, to the parents' education or the parents' attitudes or the parents' behaviours. But there's also evidence that if parents are involved, engaging with the children's maths education in a positive way, then that can offset their socioeconomic situation, but also their level of education. So in other words, if you can encourage, and I'm sure a lot of listeners know this, if you can encourage positive parental involvement in maths, then it starts to cancel out some of those disadvantages. It's quite powerful. So
that sort of makes sense, doesn't it? And it's probably, certainly one of the reasons why schools try to engage parents in their children's learning so much. And I know as a maths lead and things, I would put on workshops for parents. It never tended to be the parents that you really wanted to engage, though, that tended to come to those things. So it can be tricky, can't it, to reach out to people who are maybe inclined to dislike or fear maths, but and to engage those people and have a meaningful impact in them. That must be tricky.
I think that's a constant challenge, and I think it is for lots of charity work that you put something good out there, you put it out to everyone, obviously. But then, of course, the people who don't need the help are the ones who take it up because they're engaging in everything anyway, But we started working on this and we started trying to engage the needier parents. And we did come up with 3 useful tips for parents to help their children's feelings about maths. The first one is to point out maths in the real world whenever you can, so that the kids start to understand it's not just a classroom subject, it's actually got value in life outside of school. Secondly, to always talk positively about maths and resist the temptation to go, oh, I hate maths, but it never did me any harm, or I'm not a maths. You said earlier that people the perception is people are either maths people or they're not. We've got to start
Yeah.
changing that because,
Yeah.
potentially everyone is a maths person. They'll have different levels of ability and comfort, but we're all maths people, really. So talk positively about it at home, really powerful. And then thirdly, if parents and carers can work on their own confidence with maths and keep improving their own skills, because you can as an adult, that will have a big effect as well. So they're the 3 tips that we gradually developed.
That makes sense. I'm just reflecting on the stat that half of adults have or had back when the study was done, numeracy skills equivalent to those of a primary age child. I'm just reflecting as a former Year 6 teacher. Some of the maths that we did at primary school was quite, it wasn't necessarily simple things, was it, Julie? I'm sure you'd agree. So I'm guessing when we're talking about those sorts of skills, it's the more the sort of everyday maths that we're talking about, that it might be a barrier for people to engage with. Is that what we're thinking with that sort of stat?
Well, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because that, you say that half of adults at primary school levels, and that sounds terrible. But as you say, actually, if you're really confident with primary school maths up to that, which in adult skills, that's called entry levels. And then above that is level 1 as you start to get into secondary school. But if you're really on top of all primary school maths and feel good about it and you can apply it in daily life, actually, for most people, that's probably enough, isn't it? So it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think the problem is that it's not just those levels of skills. There's a whole load of attitudinal aspects that come into this. So maths anxiety is a phrase now that's commonly used. You've also got dyscalculia, but generally a lack of confidence. So as National Numeracy, we define numeracy as having the confidence to use basic maths in daily life, whether it's at work or at home. And actually, over the years, we've found that we're more attracted to and more involved in the confidence aspect of it than we are in the skills aspect. Because in terms of changing somebody's outcome or getting an adult to improve their maths or changing somebody's outcome at primary school, I think it's confidence that makes the difference. And if you want to get somebody started and overcoming any barriers, it's confidence is the key. So we've gradually focused on confidence.
That makes sense. I'm sure, Julie, we were talking earlier just before we started recording that you still do some work with children and things. And generally quite often those children that we're asked to work with on a more one-to-one basis, quite often the conversation will be, actually, it's their confidence, that they just lack a bit of confidence. It's not that they can't do it, they're just not confident with it. So it makes sense, I think, that we would focus on the confidence as well as the skills. Very difficult to upskill somebody if they're not feeling confident in it in the first place, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that confidence can be such a barrier. Like you said, if children and adults, don't necessarily lack the skills, it is, the confidence in applying them, isn't it? So it's such a big barrier to overcome. But obviously that's, one of our main focuses here is to do that.
Absolutely. So, Paul, here's the golden question then. How do you do that? How do we make everybody feel more confident about their maths or their relationship with maths, I suppose?
As we gradually started working with more and more adults, we did develop a model to do this which we call value, belief, and persistence. And it's based on some work that Sue Johnson Wilder and Claire Lee did. So value, belief, and persistence. So value, first of all, why do you want to improve your maths? What would the value to you be of improving your maths? I.e. the reason. Because if you don't have a reason, you're not going to get very far, are you? No. But we find that the really motivating reasons for adults are to get on at work, to support their own children, really powerful, or to manage your money. Because, you do need to be on top of percentages to manage your money. So one, value, understand the reason. Secondly, belief, and that's basically growth mindset. Now, as you said earlier, you're either a maths person or you're not, is the perception. But actually, that's not true. As an adult, you can improve your maths. Adults can learn to drive a car or learn to dance or learn a music. Adults can improve their maths. But if you're about to embark on this, you need to believe that. You need to believe that you can improve your maths. It's not the case that you're not a maths person. You can improve your maths. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, persistence. You're going to have to stick at it a bit, and it's going to feel uncomfortable because that's what learning feels like. And you're going to make some mistakes because that's what learning feels like. And mistakes in maths, for some reason with maths, it has this kind of right or wrong image to it that plays into you can do it or you can't. And if you make a mistake, you're like, oh my God, I'm terrible at maths. No, but people who get on with maths know that mistakes are fine. They're a powerful way of learning, aren't they? So
Absolutely.
persistence, understand that it's going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to persist. And if you do those, then you will improve. You will.
Maybe this is something that we'll come back to later, Julie, but one of the things that we often talk about when we're working with teachers is, and talking on the podcast about to teachers, is the value in valuing the process rather than the answer, and rewarding the thinking rather than the correct answer. And as you say, Paul, even where mistakes are made, those mistakes are valuable, aren't they? And we can take from them. But I sometimes think in maths more than any other lesson, we're just looking for the right answer all the time. And if somebody gives an incorrect answer, as teachers, it can be really tempting to just move on to somebody else and until you get the right answer, rather than explore, how we've arrived at that point. But when I reflect on, so as somebody who hated maths at school myself, had to learn how to teach it well when I became a primary teacher in my late 20s, really. Mid to late 20s. Those sort of three core concepts that you just mentioned, Paul, really make sense. So in terms of the value, I needed to be able to teach it to somebody else. I needed to be able to, stand in front of a class and be able to explain it. I certainly needed to persist with it, because I think it probably took me 4 or 5 years to really feel competent and confident in doing that. I think the belief took a little bit longer, though, to actually develop that I could do it, and I needed some early signs of initial success, I think, to help me think, actually, but when I started spotting those, I think the belief grew quite quickly that actually this is something that I can do. I think it took me till I was about 30 to actually learn my times tables, but don't test me on them now. But I do know them. I can recall them quickly now. So, as you say, as an adult, you can learn things. It's not a closed book at that point. So, that's really interesting, and lots that I think we could use in schools as well, which I'm sure that you are doing. Now, you've got a program called the Schools and Families program, Paul. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about that specifically.
Actually, I'm going to hand over to Julie, because you're
okay.
We're closer to this.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Schools and Families program, so it ties up very nicely with what we've just been talking about. We're working towards creating that positive, confident relationship with maths for whole school communities, so children and all the adults around them, parents and staff. I really liked what you just said about talking about mistakes and feeling confident. I think that dialogue that you have with children, you've got that empathy when mistakes are made. It's interesting to talk about, isn't it? How you got to that answer, and actually that will reveal often some really interesting thinking and about the maths and the numeracy. So it's valuing that, as you said, as well as correct answers, for maths. So our program, a big part is simply helping people enjoy maths more, feel more confident with numbers, moving away slightly from the idea that maths is something to fear and avoid, and reframing these preconceptions and building positive experiences with numbers. And as we said, low confidence can be that barrier to attainment. children and adults don't lack the skills. Like we said, it's that confidence in applying them. So through our program, we do focus heavily on parents and carers. So it's a program that schools deliver, based around lots of real life problems and activities that children and families can work together with on at home. Because, as we know, parents and carers, in children's lives, they're such a powerful role. So if we can encourage parents and carers to talk positively about maths and talk about maths problems, and make parents realise really how influential they are in their children's journeys, we can then start to shift the mindsets of children too. But also help parents build that confidence in numeracy as well, because many may not have had positive experiences. And then, that goes hand in hand, and you're building that parental engagement in school and in their child's journey, kind of their learning journeys. So, we're really keen to highlight how valuable maths is in everyday life. As we said, you don't have to see yourself as a maths person to benefit from numeracy. And, bringing families together around numeracy. When maths becomes something that you do together, it's much less intimidating and, has that purpose and is meaningful. But kind of at a broader level, with our program, we're looking to kind of reduce, as Paul said, socioeconomic and gender gaps in numeracy as well. Everyone deserves the opportunity to feel confident with numbers. That opens up doors in education and work and everyday life. And so, our program that we offer schools is about just building that culture where maths feels accessible to everyone and useful and enjoyable.
That sounds fantastic. I'm sure there'll be teachers listening to this now thinking, that sounds perfect. I'd love to get involved in that. And maybe we can talk a little bit later about how we do that. But what does the program actually look like then? If you are working with a school, how does that actually work? How long does it last for? What sort of support's in place? What's it look like day to day?
So currently we're offering, it's a 2-year program, and it is based around, the core part of our program is based around our family maths toolkits. So schools who gain a place on our program, they have access to these toolkits, and these are free to download, and they're aimed at years R to 6. And basically they're packed with different real life activities around maths and numeracy, just at angles where it's kind of useful, looking at activities in the home, from everything from counting to other kind of, fun problem solving activities. And they're practical activities that families can do together at home. They're low pressure. They're very open-ended, and they're designed that, anyone at home, siblings, parents, carers, grandparents, can get involved with and work together with the children on these activities. And each child in school gets given a scrapbook, which they can document all their activity, ask questions, share their family learning in. And they kind of have that at home, and they can bring it back into school to share with their class and their teachers.
Is there a particular age range for that, Julie? Is it, do you work with children across the school, or is it a particular
Yeah.
age range that
So
you're looking at?
we provide the toolkits are designed from year R to 6. So each year group, in effect, has a pack of activities that schools can use to their own discretion. So they're not labelled as year groups, but they do follow national curriculum objectives for each year group. But they can be used and differentiated however teachers see fit. So for the whole primary year R to 6,
That's fantastic.
schools can choose to roll this out as a whole school program, or they can decide to start with a couple of year groups and send those scrapbooks home and see the impact, and then choose to roll out further if they'd like, or they can just focus on target year groups that they want to in their schools.
I suppose it depends on the size of the school, doesn't it, in terms of the practicalities of doing that. If you're a two-form entry primary, that's a lot of parents and families and things to engage with at one point. But if you're a much
Yeah.
smaller school, then that might be a possibility, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. We know schools have different resources in terms of staffing and things like that. So, we really do leave it up to schools to use the program as best fits them. That's the whole idea. We don't want to put pressure on schools to say you have to deliver this as a whole school program if that's not going to benefit them, in as an outcome.
Supportive rather than prescriptive, I guess. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And in terms of that support, is there a CPD for staff at all, or does it come with guidance on how to do that?
Yeah, we do offer we offer lots of CPD for school communities. Part of the program, actually, one big part of the program that we do deliver training on is for schools to deliver their own workshops to parents, which is a really important part of the program, and we've seen a lot of success in schools with that. So we train teachers to deliver a Help Your Child Love Maths workshop. And we provide all the materials and communications for this for schools to kind of pick up and run these workshops, get parents in, talk about maths in a very non-threatening way. So we usually say, make sure your parents know they're not going to be made to do any maths in these workshops. It's all about giving them simple tips and practical ways to support their children and feel more positive about maths themselves, actually. We've found from feedback on these workshops that lots of parents have found them so interesting and, enabled them to kind of face some of their own demons, so to speak, around maths, and really realise that they don't want to pass those on to their children. And, so it is supporting them as well in kind of their own negative feelings about numeracy. But in terms of other CPD, so that's involved in our training, our core training, so to speak. That's part of the core training. We call it our numeracy champions training. So schools can train up to 3 members of staff, and they become champions for number confidence in their school. And they're kind of the key people who are delivering the program. This is delivered through 2 really focused interactive online training sessions, covers some really interesting theory, but as I said, lots of practical tips and resources to help develop their school culture and, really reach out to their whole school community and really impact their parental engagement. But throughout the 2 years, there's so many different CPD offers available for all staff in schools, not just teachers, teaching assistants and anyone else in school who may feel they need a bit of a confidence boost. There's a really brilliant CPD session called Feeling Better About Maths, and that's designed to build confidence and shift mindsets. Not about doing maths or learning any maths, but really about, talking about that, those feelings about maths and trying to change mindsets. And we run CPD webinars on a range of subjects that are really purposeful and relevant to staff, and expert-led webinars as well. So we cover key topics like maths anxiety, dyscalculia, financial education, generally, so just so staff can really deepen their understanding and again gain practical takeaways really about some of the challenges that pupils and families may face.
That sounds fantastic. How's it been going? How long have you been running this? How's it been going? What sort of impact have you seen so far?
Well, it's been amazing, actually. It's been hugely successful. So it's 2 years since the program started. And at that point, we were working with 26 schools, and it was called our parental engagement program. And then the schools and families program launched in its entity of what it is now in 2024. And since then, we've reached 600 primary schools
Wow.
50,000 pupils, 30,000 parents and carers, and about 2,000 school staff. So it's really exceeded expectations. I've only been here 6 months, and I just think it's just amazing the impact it's had so far. I know when the team were putting it together, they were wondering what it would feel like to be working with 100 schools. So 600 is amazing, and we're continually recruiting new schools who want to be part of it.
So, that obviously leads us nicely on to if people are listening to this and they think that would be ideal for my school. We know we need to engage parents. We know that there's a core group of parents perhaps who might find maths particularly difficult to talk about or just have negative feelings towards. This would be ideal for us. How do they get involved? How do you select those schools, and what do they need to do?
We get, exactly that, how you were saying, the impact that schools have seen on their kind of parental engagement is amazing. So, we've had feedback sessions and parents have been so positive. And they've, as I said, they found them so interesting and really made them think. So, if schools do feel like they might benefit from this, we do prioritise schools who have higher than average free school meals. Obviously, because we're focusing our efforts kind of in more disadvantaged areas. But we have funding to support schools for this 2-year programme. We're recruiting right now. At the moment, we're recruiting to train numeracy champions in the school in June, and then begin a 2-year programme from September. And as we've said, they're fully funded places on the programme, no cost to schools at all. So if schools think they really could benefit from this, they just need to visit the National Numeracy website, click on the Schools and Families Programme tab, and there should be lots of information there and direct links to apply. That you can always, if you're interested, get in contact with the team. It's the Schools and Families team over email. That's just schoolsandfamilies@nationalnumeracy.org.uk. So yeah, it's a very simple form to apply. And then, if you're successful, schools can go from there. But one thing schools have said is that, how surprised they are about, workload. It really is a programme that's been designed to not impact staff workload at all. We provide all our resources ready to run, ready to use, and staff have actually commented that in many ways it's eased workload in terms of sending kind of activities home as homework.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point to mention, because having been a teacher recently, I really do have empathy with, teachers on the front line, we can't emphasize enough how much, impact this program can have, and how little impact it does actually have on teachers who are delivering it.
That sounds great. And I'll make sure that we put links in the show notes as well. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you want the link to National Numeracy, where you can find out more about the Schools and Families programme, just have a look in the show notes and you'll find it in there. So what's next for the Schools and Families programme then? What's coming up next? What's the plan?
Well, as Julie said, we're delighted. It's been a runaway success. So we're going to keep going. We're seeking more funding. We want to work with more schools. We want to work with more schools for longer. And we want to. We're working across all 4 nations now. We've had fantastic support from Curriculum for Wales, so we've got plenty of schools in Wales. We want to keep building that, more schools in Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. But alongside that, we're starting to think about secondary schools as well. So we're just developing a program for secondary schools at the minute, which we are going to pilot in January. We're going to start recruiting schools in September to pilot from January for that.
That's really interesting. That's really exciting, because I know as a parent and as a teacher that the opportunities to be involved in your child's education at secondary school are generalization here, but generally vastly reduced. So I'll be really interested to see how that work goes with secondary schools, because I think that's
I think there's
fascinating.
some challenges that we want to try some things. We're going to start with year 7, I think.
Yeah.
Because that flows on nicely from the work we're already doing in year 6. And if we're going to get parental engagement, that's probably the best place to start. But there's still challenges there. So it's quite interesting and exciting talking to teachers at the minute on how we might actually create a situation where secondary school families are talking and working on numeracy at home. I think it could be quite exciting.
I also think it's an interesting time, year 7, because we see even pupils who were very confident in their maths in year 6, sometimes during that transition into secondary school, maths again becomes something that they're less keen on in that setting. So it'd be really interesting to see how that work supports those pupils as well. I will definitely be keeping an eye out on that. Now, as we say, just to wrap up, really, it's National Numeracy Day this week, tomorrow, if you're listening to this as it comes out. And there's lots and lots of opportunities for schools and teachers and classes to get involved in National Numeracy Day. Somebody wants to tell me just a little bit more about it this year, and what National Numeracy Day is, how you can get involved, I suppose.
Yeah, as you said, it's National Numeracy Day on Wednesday, the 20th. So this year, it's just an amazing day. There's so much going on around numeracy, online and offline, and in schools and in other communities, workplaces. It's just a fantastic day. And this year, the theme is Count on Your Community. So it's got a real focus this year on how we use numbers in real life. So in our communities, in our groups, in our clubs, workplaces. So there's lots and lots going on. In terms of schools, there's some fantastic toolkits that teachers can sign up for on the National Numeracy website. Sign up for them. It's really quick and easy, and you get access to these toolkits, which are packed with free resources, from lesson plans to activity ideas, videos, and we've got some live lessons going on Wednesday as well, featuring our ambassadors. And don't worry if you can't celebrate on Wednesday, it carries on beyond the day itself too. So all our resources are ready to pick up and use on demand as and when teachers need them.
Amazing. It sounds great. I will definitely be checking out those things on Wednesday, tuning into some of the live content as well, because it all sounds really exciting. Check out National Numeracy Day on Wednesday, or if you've missed it, don't worry, all the resources are still there. You can still go and download some of those activities, and it's a great opportunity, by the sounds of it, to get your school community involved in thinking about numeracy and thinking about maths. Thank you so much to Paul and Julie for coming and joining us today. I've learned loads about the work of National Numeracy, and it sounds like there's some amazing opportunities for schools to get involved in that work and really begin to develop a culture around your school, in your community, of thinking positively about maths, which, as anybody who listens to this podcast knows, we're a huge advocate of. That's all for this episode. Becky and I will be back on Friday with another After Maths episode. If you want to get in touch with the show, you always can do. It's primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk, or find us on any of the socials. With that in mind, I'll just say thanks again to Paul and Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for inviting us on.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you on Friday. Thanks, everyone. Take care.